Hey everybody, Riot Mort here with Riot Static, and we are halfway through the first half of the set. So I guess we're like 0.25% of the way there. But here we are, patch 11.12, patch rundown with some exciting stuff coming to the set. Lots of cool stuff to talk about. Are you excited to share some of the stuff you've been working on?
Yeah, this patch we put in a lot of work. I mean, we try to put in a lot of work on all our patches, but this one was a lot from us. So
Yep.
hopefully this lands really well.
Cool. I think there's a lot going on, and I think a lot of people are nervous kind of hearing what's coming. So let's dive into it, and let's get into some of these details, hopefully alleviate some of the concerns, because I'm pretty happy with this, actually. All right.
Yeah.
First off, bonus armories. Bonus armories are a big change, but allow me to explain how they work. So Armory 2-2, nothing changed. You're still going to see one shadow item, one component. Armory 3-2. Instead of seeing two normal items, you will now also see one shadow item, one component. Okay? Then from there, the game has changed. The 4-2 armory is no longer guaranteed, so that 4-item armory is gone. Instead, 4-2, 5-2, 6-2, and 7-2 now have a chance for a bonus armory. This bonus armory can contain things like just item components, consumables, which are back, we'll talk about those, spatulas, full items, emblems, Nico's helps, things like that. They can get pretty wacky. The way it works is everyone gets the same quality of armory. So if I see 3 emblems and a full item, as you see here, everyone sees 3 emblems and a full item, but not the same 3 emblems and a full item. So there is variance within that, but everyone gets the same quality. And they're more rare as it goes on. So like you're not going to see the variance of seeing a 3 emblem goes up as time goes on. And then the other thing to call out is that the emblems, the earlier they are, the more random they are, whereas the later they are, the more tied to your specific traits they are. Did I miss anything on all that, since you're the one who put a lot of the work into this?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, my brain's still like, yeah, even you talking about it, that sounded all accurate, but man, that's a lot of stuff to take in this moment. So yeah.
Yep. The big thing I'm pretty excited about here is like there's a lot more variance game to game, which I think is really healthy. It's one of the things the set has been lacking. It's not pure RNG. Like the odds of seeing a Hellion spat at 4-2, because 4-2 is the earliest you can see them, are still pretty low. It can happen, but it's still pretty low. There's a lot of cool things here. And then I know a common thing I've heard is like, oh, loaded dice are back. And it's true, loaded dice are back. But like if you look at these cases, it's like you could take a loaded dice at 5-2 or 4-2 by giving up a GA or a Warmogs. Is that worth? Not sure about that one. I actually think loaded dice is going to be really unpopular, but
Yeah, I think the consumables. Well, it depends. Sometimes I think it'll make sense, and sometimes it won't make sense. So yeah, I mean, like overall, we're just trying to add a lot more like spice and excitement in general to the to this set. Just making sure that every time you load in, you're not exactly sure how it's gonna play out, and you're just really excited to see what you can put together. And I think this helps add a lot more possibilities to the game now. And yeah, sometimes you'll feel like you got high rolled out of your mind, and sometimes you're gonna feel like you're the one high rolling. So I think there's just a little bit of that, but hopefully within the 4 choices, there's always something that you feel like you could have done to make the right choice and for you in this game and win.
Keep us honest. I mean, we're certainly not trying to change the game to an RNG fest, but again, I do think this creates some really cool moments. My favorite of which, when testing so far, was I had a shadow bow and I was playing Hellion, and 5-1 came, and I forgot these were a possibility, so I slammed my shadow bow. And then 5-2 came, and there was a spatula on the carousel, and I was like, I could have done it. And it created now an interesting choice where now I'm like, do I hold my items to 5-2? Do I wait for the armory? So that's been fun. I think it's positive, but keep us honest. Give us your feedback as you play it. Overall, though, I am legitimately excited for these.
I think there's a lot of iteration that we'll have to do down the line. What are the exact categories and all the things. Those are stuff that we can work on as we get more actual players playing it. Because right now it's only been played mostly by internally and a little bit on PvE. But yeah, super exciting.
Cool. All right, shop rates. This is another change I've put in. It's a bit of a risky one, I'm not going to lie. But one of the things we're seeing is that early 3 costs are pretty helpful to the game. They help establish direction. They're kind of an early game carry that create excitement. They're pretty good. Kind of wanted to make those more available so that if someone high rolls one out of an orb, it's still possible for you to also get one out of a shop. So basically at level 4 and 5, we're bumping up the 3 cost odds by 5%. And again, this is kind of like we're still dealing with the ramifications of Chosen, but there you go.
I think this could have like 2 different effects. One is like, hey, now everyone feels like they have a chance at, getting the 3 cost that unlocks, whatever path they're looking for. But also it might get leaked to some cases where like, oh wait, they have like a 2-star, 3 cost on some earlier stage than you expected, and that might lead to some things. So it's gonna be interesting. It's definitely spicy, I'll say the least.
Yeah, if there's one change, and again, I'm the one who put it in, so definitely hold me accountable. But if there's one change I'm worried about this patch, it is this one. I want to see how this plays out, but I do think it's going to be good. Cool. Loot orbs. So you will now see Reforgers and Magnetic Removers drop from loot orbs sometimes. The good news is these are purely bonus. If you got one of these, it's just inflationary. You didn't lose out on any gold. You didn't lose out on anything else. It's just, in addition to the gold that would have normally dropped, here, have a Reforger and Magnetic Remover. We've chosen these 2 because we think they open up some cool plays and cool depth. We're pretty excited about these. So when you get them, enjoy them.
Yeah, I think we've only made one key update to the Reforger, which is it'll only re-roll items within its same category. So, for example, like shadow items will only reforge into shadow items, stuff like that. In particular, like emblems will only reforge into other emblems, and so like just play around with it and see how it plays out.
Just for clarity, because I think that's a great call out. If I use it on an emblem that is from a shadow item, can it re-roll any emblem or only the shadow emblems?
Shadow emblems. Yeah, it's only within its like.
Okay, so if I used it on a Hellion one, I can't get a Spellweaver emblem.
No.
Cool.
No. You get like A-bomb or whatever. Yeah.
Great. Good to know. Okay. And then the last one is another big change here. The base critical strike damage of every champion in the game is going from 50% to 30%. The reason we're making this change right now is that the itemization path of basically everyone in the game right now is crit items. You want Infinity Edge if you're an AD champion. You want Jeweled Gauntlet if you're an AP champion. And mathematically, these are the best builds by a long shot. Now you might be asking, why not just nerf those items then? Well, because it still means you want Critical Strike, it's just harder to get, and because there's so much in the base, you have to nerf those items into oblivion, and it gets really gross. This is also a slight nerf to Assassins, who benefit from it the most. But generally what this will do is, interestingly enough, it won't change anything. Like, the best builds are still going to be the crit builds. I think the one exception is like Assassins might finally want Death Cap over IE, for example, in Katarina. But otherwise, it's very similar. Vel'Koz is still going to want Jeweled Gauntlet. It just lowers the difference between a Jeweled Gauntlet Vel'Koz and a Death Cap Vel'Koz. So it should help that power distribution feel better across the board. There is some concerns that like we are lowering the peak, so tank builds may get a little good. We're going to keep a very close eye on that. But overall, this should be very healthy to the game.
Yeah, I mean, this is a necessary fallout of some of the earlier changes we did around removing damage amp items, so like the old Hodge and stuff like that. Just need to get everything back into like a more regulated ecosystem.
Yep.
That's going to be interesting to see how this plays out.
Yeah, I think there's some longer term work to do here, but in the short term, I think this gets us to a healthier state where not everyone wants Infinity Edge and Jeweled Gauntlet. So, cool. Trait changes. Chase traits. There are 6 chase traits we've decided to add. Dragon Slayer is probably the spiciest because it requires 2 spatulas, so it's probably the hardest to get, but it's also very strong. Ironclad gets some extra armor. Renewer 6 is probably one of the more powerful ones. A Renewer 6 Heimerdinger casts very quickly. Holy shit. Revenant 4 is another one we've got a very close eye on. Revenant 4 is going to make Nocturne builds very strong. If I think anything is subject to change before the actual patch notes, it's that Nocturne may need a nerf because of something like this. Spellweaver 6 I think will be a very fun one. I'm not actually worried about it. I think it'll just be fun. And then Skirmisher 9 is one that I'm excited for and frankly might even need buffs because like it's one of those 9-piece chase traits that's very difficult to hit. So yeah, some really cool new chase traits. Hopefully you have fun with these.
Yeah, I think the funny thing to point out is that renewer number at 6 used to be like its renewer 4 number. I
I
think at
know,
like
I
20%
know.
PvE or something. It was crazy.
Yep. There are some we didn't add. We didn't add Assassin 8. We might still later, but we were a little nervous with the state of Assassins right now that buffing them further, even as a chase trait, was a little wonky. We did not add Cavalier 5 for the exact same reason. Does anybody really want Cavalier 5 in the current state right now? Probably not. And then there's
100% damage reduction.
I was thinking 90, but like, yeah, probably not. And then there are also other ones we could add that we're still on the fence about, things like Mystic 5. So give us feedback, let us know if these were fun, and if they were, fuck it, we'll add some more. So, cool. All right, actual balance stuff. Okay, as we mentioned in the patch postmortem, Abomination has kind of been, because this, like, it needs nerfs, no question, but the identity has not been where we've been happy with it. It feels like an assassin. It always charges into the backline, and then you use those strong items to just blow up 3 or 4 carries with ridiculous damage output. So we're trying to change that. We're trying to shift him more into a ball of health that can still do some damage, but nowhere near the damage output he has right now. So here's the changes. First off, when he's charging in, after he hits the second target, he stops. He's not free backline access anymore. That alone is probably the biggest nerf here, because now, if he charges through 2 Cavaliers and gets stuck on a Hecarim, he's stuck on a Hecarim. That's a big deal. Versus the instant your Vel'Koz is gone, your Aphelios is gone. His spell does now remove AD reduction and attack speed slows, so he's not as vulnerable to CC, which is good. He gets a buff at 4 and 5 for his armor and MR, but at every level his AD is going down. And so again, overall, this is probably a nerf, which is supposed to be, but it's also a shift in his potential that he should be more viable as a tanky health sponge for something like A-Bomb Spellweavers, A-Bomb Dravens we've been seeing, instead of just the backline assassin that kills everything.
Yeah, my personal take on this is I think it's going to be a little harsh, honestly. Like, looking at it now, I think he might be a little... A-Bomb might struggle a little bit next patch, but I think this is in the right direction. Like, it makes a lot of sense to me where we're going with this. We'll see.
Yep. Cool. Dawnbringer. This is probably another one of the spicy changes. Ever since we removed the Dawnbringer prevents you from insta-dying, the trait's been struggling. It's just, you run it early a little bit maybe to protect a Riven, and then you get the hell out of it. And as one of our premier verticals, that's not okay. We want the premier verticals to be playable to some extent. If you get 8 Dawnbringer, you're supposed to be excited, not sad. And so we're giving it a pretty big power shift here on the damage. The more Dawnbringer you have, the bigger that damage gets. And if you're running 6, that's all your Dawnbringers can do, up to 90% more damage. So this is a big shift, but we do think it is correct. Keep us honest. We'll have a close eye on Riven and Karma. If they get too out of control in 6 Dawnbringer builds, we can talk about that. But right now, Dawnbringer's kind of been ignored as a trait, and it needs the love.
Yeah, damage amp is obviously one of the most rare stats these days, so it's definitely a strong lever to pull, and I think it should be exciting, but yeah.
Redeemed, same thing. No one's really playing Redeemed 6 or 9. These should be good. We also didn't want to go crazy, though. We wanted to be really careful with Redeemed, because when Redeemed is super strong, it can be very frustrating. You can feel pretty helpless. So we went pretty light here, +5, +10. Hopefully we start seeing some 6 Redeemed be an option without it being overbearing. We'll see.
Yeah, maybe we could have gotten away with 30, 60, 90, but yeah, again, it's hard to say because like the numbers look small, but because of that mechanism where it stacks up to the later champ, it gets pretty out of control. So.
Yep. Skirmisher, same deal. Skirmisher 3, their early game, like finding early Skirmisher 3 is just nowhere near as rewarding right now. Trying to make sure that's a little bit more of an option. Trying to actually make sure that it's not like Berserker where you must play 6. 3 is like at least being considered. So 3 just gets a slight buff here.
Yeah, especially following the change to Kennen, I feel like definitely makes sense.
Yeah, that's true. Skirmishers really got hurt by the Kennen nerf. That's true. Okay, 1-cost champs. So I want to call out that right now, one of the things I came back and wasn't super happy with was early game balance, especially playing on vacation. Like, early game balance felt pretty bad. So definitely keep us honest here in early game balance. We didn't put in a ton here, but at the same time, we do think these are things that will help, and then we want to monitor it very closely and go from there. So what you're seeing here is Lysandra gets a very slight damage buff. Vayne, we're being very careful, gets a very slight damage buff, so that 2-star Vayne shouldn't feel nearly as bad, but not patch 11.10 where it was the Vayne meta. Same with Vlad, a very slight gets to cast more often. And then Ziggs, who usually is pretty safe, at least has some counterplay. So these things should all hopefully make early game a little bit more variable and have a little bit more options.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully this just nudges everything in the right direction. So
cool. On the 2-cost side, okay, Brand. Why don't you explain the Brand one? Because I know this was done to be a bug fix, but is also an okay, healthy nerf.
Yeah, I mean, Brand is definitely kind of like one of the overperformers left in the 2-cost tier, especially giving the 40% at six, level 6 roll odds. And yeah, I mean, he's basically triggering some kind of weird bug within our system where he was actually triggering cast events twice for some reason. And just by increasing his mana lock, we can actually fix that bug, but also just make his cast cadence more reasonable. This is going to slow him down a little bit, but because he's a dot champion that fights over, like long periods of like 10 to 15 seconds, I think it won't affect him as much as it would if we did this on a normal champion. So I think he'll still be really good, but just a little notch down.
Yep. Okay, Hecarim. This is another one that I'm going to say is subject to change too. Like if we change anything before it launches, this needs some more testing. But basically, we agree Hecarim needs a nerf, which is why we nerfed his healing, regardless. Like his healing's just going down. In addition, though, there's a really bad bug on live right now where his damage does not scale with AP. This means if you're running Forgotten, he's not getting better. If you're running a Shadow Ionic Spark, he's not getting better. And we fixed that. But obviously, if we fixed that, he would just be an insane monster. So we cut his damage pretty hard here. You can see it's like 40%. But keep in mind, if you have like a single, more than 40% AP, you're right back where you're on live. And if you have more than that, you're even better. So definitely something we're going to have to monitor very closely. I'm going to do some PB testing this weekend. These numbers may shift before the patch locks. It's like super locks, but that's kind of the direction we're going with Hecarim.
I think the number's more around like 60 or 70% AP to get back to where he needs to be. But I mean, the reasoning all checks out, I think, of what you said. So.
Yep. Cool. LeBlanc is another one we're kind of finally putting a pin in. We've tried to keep her damage and CC, and it just hasn't worked. So we're finally pulling the plug. LeBlanc is a CC champion. She is not your primary carry. The damage got cut in half, which is a very, very large nerf. To compensate, she gets a little bit of extra health, so she can survive, and she gets some stun duration back, but her job is to CC things. And so if you want to run GA Dark Blue buff to CC lock 2 champions, go right ahead. But you'll be doing half the damage you were last patch.
Yeah, I think she's not going to be really a huge item carrier, I think, anymore after this patch. But, if you have a spare blue buff or a dark blue buff, it still makes sense to throw it on her for value.
Yep. All right, Nautilus. This is another change I snuck in. But, again, we're talking about the early game balance. One of the comps that just sucks early game is Knights. Like, if you get a nice early 2 Knight, you're not excited. If you get a 2-star Nautilus at 2-1, you don't care. Because you're not killing anything. You're not doing anything. You're just stalling fights. So Poppy and Leona have had really high base ADs for a while, and we've seen that be successful. So a bunch of the Knights are getting the same treatment so that eventually they can kill things. And Nautilus in particular, who was really underperforming, his spell can actually do some damage. And so if you get 4 Knights now, maybe you can actually kill something, and maybe that's okay and exciting. So that's what this is for.
This change is really unassuming, but I think it's actually one of my favorite changes in the patch. I think this is makes the game more fun and just in general. So it's good.
Yeah. Similarly, that's why Sejuani and Thresh are getting some AD buffs here. Same kind of thing. You get them early, you should be happy, and you should be able to get some kills. There's no reason Sejuani has to tickle people. I don't think this, people might go, oh, a Sejuani buff when she's already insane in Cavalier. This isn't going to change that. This isn't going to, especially with all the Hecarim nerfs and Brand nerfs. This is a healthy change. Same with the Thresh one. These should just be very light things that allow Knights to be a little better in the early game, Cavaliers to be okay in the early game, maybe even, Nightbringer with Sejuani, but not, drastically shift the meta. So that's what these are for. Cool. On the 3-cost side, Katarina's another one that I think is subject to change here. We definitely know the 3-star needs a little bit of a nerf, just a little one. And you can see here, 450 to 420 is a very light nerf, just a little overperforming. We could also see a 1-star nerf. That is the kind of thing that if something were to sneak in last minute, I'd see a 1-star Katarina nerf. So just something to keep an eye on. Nunu's another one I think has been kind of overperforming with the brawlers. So we went real light though. Any thoughts on those two?
Yeah, I think you hit Cat on the head for sure. I think that makes a lot of sense. On Nunu, I'm a little nervous because I think he's so tied to his traits right now, and when they're performing well, he also performs really well. But I think the second, like if Abomination struggles this patch, he might actually be struggling a lot more than people think. But yeah, it's probably a warranted nerf, and it's not even a big nerf, so it is what it is.
I think if anything, the set nerf was the more damaging one to Nunu because like the 4 brawler comp is where he was the most successful. So that is again why we went light, I think. So. Riven, same thing. We talked about this in the patch postmortem. This is just a revert. I don't think this really changes much. 3-star Riven's still really good. If you've ever actually looked at her AD and seen that 800 number, it's kind of ludicrous. So just a revert there.
He's also getting side buffed by the Dawnbringer buff, and we definitely didn't want to leave her at her power state. Plus do that. It just seemed a little scary. So
yep, agreed. And then Zyra's been on a weird journey, because if you remember PBE, Zyra was like bonkers, that the Mort Dog Madness tournament where Zyra was basically the best champ in the game. But now it's like, if you play on live, and if someone handed you a 3-star Zyra at like 3-5, you're like, thanks, I guess? It's not good. So this is to try to shift it back into, I'm excited to get a 3-star Zyra, but it's not like dominating. So she gets to cast a little bit more often, just a little. We didn't buff the CC duration or anything like that. And in fact, she gets a nerf at 1 and 2 to compensate. So the idea here is 1-star and 2-star, she does a little more CC and the same DPS. But at 3-star, it's a very slight buff.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me, honestly. I think she's been a tricky one because her spell's kind of like an AOCC, but sometimes it doesn't hit as many used as you'd expect. So it's a tricky one.
Yep. Okay, on the 4-cost side, Jax, this is just a revert for 1 and 2-star. We talked about this in the patch postmortem. We over-nerfed Jax. We shouldn't. He's supposed to be a good 4-cost carry, and he's okay, but this should bring him back. And 3-star, frankly, he's just been underperforming, so it looks like we just overbuffed the hell out of 3-star, so...
I hope it's cool next patch and we see some cool things go up in. But like, we might even need to buff Jax more than from this point. Actually, we just weren't sure and didn't want to go overboard. Like seesawing him back and forth every other patch. So
yep. All right, the Karma change. This is pretty complicated, but generally the idea here is Karma was way too tied to blue buff. If you tried to play Karma without a blue buff, you're not playing a real champion. This is trying to fix that. So what we've done is we've increased her mana lock so that even with blue buff, she will always auto once per cast. So you'll always need to auto, which means blue buff Karma got nerfed. But we lowered her mana and changed her mana reduction per cast so that like Shojin Karma is almost as good, like damn near as good, and eventually when they ramp up is just as good. So that now be able to hit that point just as quickly with a different itemization. But then to compensate, because the DPS of Karma has gone down, we're buffing the spell. And so she'll do even more damage per hit. She'll be able to hit harder. She won't be firing quite as frequently, but they'll be hitting harder. And again, tap this in with the Dawnbringer. Hopefully this is just a general like quality of life for Karma, and good in a lot of cases if you don't have blue buff and can still play her, and should be a very good change.
Yeah, I mean, the hope is that she just gets more flexible. I think the original change we had in was a little bit weird. It looked a little bit crazy, but I think hopefully we got it to the right point.
We did Sims,
counting in the Dawnbringer buff too.
We did Sims on Wednesday with the higher numbers, and she was looking a little nutty, so we pulled back on those. So cool. 5-cost. That's an old slide. Let's skip that slide. Didn't delete that slide. 5-cost. Kayle, like I said, this is a band-aid. Kayle, the invulnerability aspect of her is still very frustrating when you put a Ginsu's on her and she just ends up invulnerable at the end of a fight and you can't do anything because she's autoing 7 times within a second, and so you can't do anything. So we're just making that invulnerability window larger here. Again, 11-13, bigger project on Kale. This is a band-aid for now. Not gonna lie.
Yeah, I mean, this obviously this effect kind of ties her to Ginsu's in a lot of scenarios, I think, which kind of sucks. But at the time of creating it, we were worried that people were just gonna build her tank like Warmogs, GA, something weird, and so we kind of tried to put in some kind of auto attack, incentive for her survivability, and it was just I think it ended up being a bit too crazy. So.
Yep. All right, item side. We talked about this in the patch postmortem. Archangel buffs. I'm not huge fans of this, but whatever. It might be fine. Any thoughts here?
I think it's the right direction. I think we might have to fix Warwick's interaction with this once these items are actually good, but I could be wrong.
Yep. Bloodthirster. Bloodthirster has been another item that its shield was a really good change. Giving it that shield to save champions has been really nice, but the amount of healing you're getting on champions like Draven, Aphelios, some of these high AD champions, even Set, it's just a little bonkers. So we're trying to pull that back just a little bit. That way you actually can kill Bloodthirster champions at some point, maybe.
Yeah, it's a small enough nerf, and Bloodthirster has enough things going for it, and especially in the set where there's a bunch of need for sustain. So
yep.
I think it'll still be great.
Yep. Risk Thirster, same thing. You're going to see this probably a lot more in the future. A lot of the curses have been very restrictive. The fact that Set, for example, really wants Bloodthirster but refuses to build Risk Thirster, probably not very healthy in the long run. So you're going to see us pull back on some of these curses a bit. This is one of those cases. Just a little less punishing to build Risk Thirster.
I think we could have gone farther here, honestly. I think this item's struggling quite a bit, but right direction.
Hand of Justice, same thing. Hand of Justice we could talk for hours on because there's some lessons to be learned about having a super good flexible item. In the short term, though, we're just going to buff the item. Still more work to be done here, but hopefully Hand of Justice feels a little bit better.
Yeah, the hope here is that we can get Hand of Justice to be a little bit more of a flexible item as it used to be, but we'll have to see how that plays out.
Nice. Ionic Spark, same thing. It's just been an item that's been underperforming. Again, I still think we have more work to do here, but now we can at least align its MR shred with things like Static Shiv, Garen, stuff like that. So it's just another option to get that 50%. Again, I still think we have a lot more work to do on this item, but it's a buff. Should be fine.
Yeah, cool.
Jeweled Gauntlet. This one is pretty complicated, and I will say not props to Kent on this one because I think the complexity is a little too high here. But what we're trying to accomplish here is good, which is right now, this item was basically unbuildable on brand. You would never build this item on brand, but it was insanely and good on Heimerdinger, Vel'Koz, things like that. This levels that off. Basically, it's a power neutral, give or take, for someone like a Vel'Koz. Maybe even a slight nerf on a Heimerdinger. But it's a massive buff on Brand. Brand can now build this item and be okay, because he's going to take 100% of his max mana, which is 20. So 20 whole damage times the star level, so 2-star 40. Ooh, 40 damage? That's okay. A Brand might be willing to sacrifice that. So hopefully it makes this item a little bit more flexible. And again, combined with the crit nerfs of earlier, that's probably okay. So again, trying to increase that item flexibility.
Yeah, its tooltip's getting really complicated. It was already one of the most complicated tooltips, which sucks. But hopefully it gets the output we want, at least, so the cost of that is worth it.
Yeah, it's feeling like Jin's SR passive, where it's a lot of words to say more crit,
Yeah.
And then the biggest change in the entire, if you memorize one change, this is the important one. We renamed Vengeful Trapclaw to Banshee's Claw. Woo!
Oh yeah, exciting stuff.
Nice. All right, on the bug fix side, this one's really important, and this is also why I wouldn't let a Vel'Koz buff go through. Vel'Koz will now switch targets if they're in GA or Revenant state. So he's no longer stuck on the GA. GA is no longer a hard counter to Vel'Koz, and will actually be able to do more here. So that's a big buff to Vel'Koz. In a lesser buff, Pantheon gets to do the same. Not that Pantheons were getting stuck all over the place, but there you go. Pantheon can crit, though, now. So another champion that wants IE all of a sudden. Hooray! And then Rel will now properly get credits for her shield in the shield and healing chart. So no longer think people thinking Rel is weak. And then units should no longer attempt to chase Kennen if he dashes far away. So Kennen shouldn't mess up armies as much. Should be good stuff. So that's it for the patch. It's a big patch. The hope, though, is that it's not like giantly meta shifting so much as it is getting things closer to balance and adding some fun new toys to play with. So that's kind of our general direction.
Yeah, I mean, I think it hopefully will feel a little bit like an a set 5.25 type of situation with this new armory enhancement. But you never know. I hope it's as fun as we imagined it to be. So
cool. All right. So for closing thoughts, I think we have an announcement, and I think it's a good news announcement, not a bad news announcement. So you want to dive into that?
Yeah. This will be the last time that I'm like regularly, at least on the rundown and the postmortem, because I'll be moving to do more work actually on the set side of things. So working on things way before, helping whatever we're working on, whether it's like the set mechanics or just the champions and stuff like that, just helping the team out there. Still be talking with live tons with Kent and Mort, because they're my buddies. And now Mort will be leading the charge for now and be on this show with Kent all the time. So if maybe I'll come and guest star once in a while, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, I think the big thing I want to call out here is this isn't a failing of Static in any slight way. What this is us kind of shifting priorities a little bit. We want to make sure the sets come out in a slightly better state. Because frankly, I mean, the whole team is understaffed. I'm not going to lie. Like we're all working our best. But getting sets more muscle to make sure that the sets launch in a better state, I think is a really good investment. Set 5.5, set the next set after that. We've got some really cool stuff in the works, and we want to make sure that lands well. And Static is one of our best people at knowing how to implement things, knowing how it all works, coaching others to get stronger. So moving him over to sets, I think, is going to be really good. In the meantime, that means we don't have a live lead, so I'll be covering that like back in the old days. But Kent has also shown tremendous potential, and so I'll be training, and maybe there's a day where Kent takes the reins, so we'll see. Cool. All right, so that's going to do it for us. Hopefully you guys enjoy patch 11.12. Keep giving us lots of feedback. Keep us honest. Really call out where you think things aren't working. We want to keep making it better. As always, these are subject to change. The official patch notes will come out Tuesday. The patch is Wednesday. Keep that in mind. So, yeah. So, until next time, I think that's it. Take it easy.